Hey, horror fam, I've got to apologize to y'all for the brief episode and awful audio quality as I've suddenly started dealing with major encoding lag issues out of the blue. Thank you, OBS. But a super big apology goes out to my awesome guest, Matthew Hidalgo, as what was a couple hour conversation ended up only being around half an hour of usable content. We'll get you on again. And with that, on with the show. Hello, horror fan best friends and ghoulish knights, and welcome to the 33rd episode of Murders with Mertens. I am your host, Joe, and this is a podcast about horror, true crime thrillers, folk horror, body horror, sci-fi horror, the horror adjacent, thrillers, the psychologically terrifying, scary films in general. Each episode, I sit down with a guest and discuss one of their favorite scary films so that we can gush about everything that makes it just so damn cool. Viewers, thank you for the support. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you are so inclined. It all helps to get the word out and bring some much needed love to this little podcast. Audio listeners, the show is also available on podcast services around the world like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So don't forget to leave a rating when you stop by. 5 stars is always appreciated. But enough of all that. Enough of all that housekeeping. Tonight, I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming for his Murders with Mertens debut, one Matthew Hidalgo. Matt, how the hell are you?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I'm recovering over strep throat, so that's a positive.
Yeah,
So
you were
Zodiac not for the first time.
Good. Yeah, you were definitely under the weather. Yeah. So glad to hear you doing better. Your voice sounds good. I know you got a couple of little ones keeping you busy too, so it's never fun dealing with that kind of stuff when you are sick yourself. So
Yeah.
everybody else doing okay? Everybody healthy?
Thankfully, no one else got sick. My wife was able to pick up the slack for what I had to rest on, so that was awesome. But yeah, everyone's doing good.
Good. Well, tonight's episode features 2007 Zodiac, directed by David Fincher, written by James Vanderbilt, and based on the books by Robert Graysmith. Matt, why Zodiac?
Zodiac is hands down, and this is a big statement, my favorite Fincher film. Like, I love Seven. I love Alien 3. Aliens Cubed, however you want to say it.
Unapologetically, I love that one as well, especially that I can't remember if it's the assembly cut or whatever, the one that's also part of the whole quadrilogy box set thing.
Yeah, I think it's the assembly.
It's a really good cut.
It is.
But yeah,
the whole religious aspect that he goes through, like the religious iconography of that film, like fits so well with Ridley Scott and then Giger's artwork. Like that styling, they go surprisingly really well together.
Well, let me tell you, if you're a fan of Alien 3, make sure to check out the comic book adaptation of William Gibson's original script.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's weird. It's all get out. You can get it in graphic novel format. It's a thing.
Nice.
Yeah, all the religious stuff that you mentioned. There was originally supposed to be a thing with like space communists or whatever. And yeah, that is all that stuff is present in this comic. It is weird. So yeah,
Dark
be sure.
Horse 90s?
Yeah, definitely Dark Horse.
Yeah,
Yep.
of course.
Although not out of the 90s. It's much more recent. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Dude, no, I grew up on like 90s Predator and Aliens Dark Horse run. Classic. Some really good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely same. That stuff was like my big jump into comics in the 90s. So yeah, we are simpatico, sir. But yeah, Zodiac is your favorite Fincher film. That's cool, man. It
is.
You know, we were talking a little bit before the show about how, you know, maybe it doesn't have all the aspects of a typical David Fincher film, but it's certainly got like the fun camera techniques that he typically employs.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the cast that you find in a lot of his movies. Yeah, yeah. I very much
If you
enjoy
watch
this
the
one.
making of, yeah, if you
Mm.
watch the making of, it certainly has his numerous amount of takes.
Yeah, he's absolutely famous for that. Um,
Oh yeah.
uh, and for as long as the film is, it's creeping up on what,
Oh.
2 3/4 hours, something like that. It's
Yep. Yep.
yeah, it's a long movie. And I think that's only fair for a film that, takes place over the span of something like 4 decades. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Uh, uh, yeah, I don't know if it's, God, I don't even know if I could definitively say what my favorite Fincher film is, but this would
It's
absolutely
a
have to
hard
be
one.
up there. Yeah. Yeah. I just,
I get why it's not everyone's cup of tea. It's like a lot of the big stuff happens at the beginning, and
mhm.
the rest of the film has to deal with obsession, and so you're not quite getting as much throughout the majority of the film. But I find that so much more interesting because you're really getting to deep dive into the characterization of Gyllenhaal's Robert Graysmith,
Mhm.
and you're really kind of living in his head, just his head, for a good half of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, at the end of the day, the film's much more about him and his obsession than
Mhm.
it is the actual killer himself, whoever that may or may
Yeah.
not have been. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the film would definitely like to force you towards Graysmith's conclusion there, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I'm sure you noticed in your research. It's yeah.
yeah, it's hey, it would be nice to put a little bow on this story, but yeah, that's definitely open for debate.
Yeah.
But
It's one of those reminders like researching that this is based on Ray Smith's books, not
yes,
the historical events that took place.
yep,
Especially when you towards the end and that biases starts to come out, that's really it's hard to swing it any other way than it pointing to spoiler alert. Can I say him?
yeah,
Arthur Lee Allen. Like it's
yeah, yeah. As much as
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I would like to eventually dive into his books. I think it would be a fascinating read, but yeah, he's certainly got his biases there for sure.
Mm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Arthur Lee Allen, the scene where we're introduced to him, it's probably,
Ooh.
yeah, probably one of my favorite bits of the film. But in this
Oh,
rewatch,
hands down.
I noticed something that I don't know that I've ever noticed before. They really veer into Silence of the Lambs territory with this
Oh,
because
definitely.
you're getting the direct eye contact with the camera thing, which is like the bulk of Silence of the Lambs. And you feel like you're being interviewed or interrogated in some ways.
Yep.
It's very effective. I like it a lot.
It is.
And I can't believe I never noticed that bit too. Cause I've seen
Yeah.
this movie
Like
many times.
Ruffalo doesn't say anything until he asks for the watch.
Hmm.
Like he is very like listening and giving a little facial tics, but he doesn't say anything until he asks for the watch. And he asks for the watch very politely,
Oh,
but
yes.
you see like it kind of sets I can't remember the actor's name, but Arthur Lee Allen, the character, kind of sets him aback.
Mhm.
And it's the whole like I flash him the watch. No, no, no. Can I see the watch? Yeah, really good
Yeah.
scene. Really strong scene between
Yep.
all four of the actors in that scene too.
Yeah. God, what a stacked cast this movie has.
I know.
It's nuts, man. It's like we talked about. There's a lot of Fincher regulars, but
Yeah,
yeah,
Gyllenhaal first for him.
yep,
I
yep,
think I
and
read it was Jennifer Aniston recommendation.
Yeah, I read that too. And Fincher was already a fan of his from Donnie Darko. So, but we're not here to talk about Donnie Darko. What were some things that jumped out at you in this rewatch?
Let me think. I mean, honestly, the score, not the music used, like
Not
not
the
the licensed
soundtrack,
track
but yeah.
used for the film, but the actual score written for the film. I didn't really notice it because the soundtrack takes center stage to
Oh, yeah.
encapsulate like what period in time that's taking place in. The score is really good. Like it's
Yeah.
very fitting. It moves the story without having those silent beats of nothing going on or the transitions between licensed music to licensed music. Like the score does a
Yeah.
good beat of keeping in step with Grace Smith's journey from start to finish.
Yeah. It's funny because the original cut of this film was so much longer, and ultimately, I guess Fincher had to cut out a ton of licensed music because he was using so much to signal, the transitions of time, and ultimately, the story progressing over the years. What we're left with is still just a banger soundtrack. There's so many good tracks on this one, not the least of which the Donovans on Hurdy Gurdy Man. But
my favorite.
Yeah, nothing like some psychedelic folk.
Especially with gunshot background.
Yeah. It's God, this is just such a fun, well-crafted film. And I just don't remember at the time many people talking about it. This was,
I agree.
what, like 16 years ago, something like that. And I didn't see it in the theater. I remember I know. Fairly certain my ex and I, we rented it through the disc version of Blockbuster's Netflix thing that they used to have. And that's how we saw it.
I'm very familiar with that.
Oh yeah, that was always such a confusing thing of mailing it back or turning them in at the store or whatever. And
you want to hear a story?
Oh boy. Yeah.
So, as you're aware, the policy when it started was you could return the disc at the store, swap it out for something in the store. So you didn't have to pay an extra rental. It was just a hand in, take one out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they changed that policy, they didn't notify the stores. So all of a sudden, we get customers coming in trying to do that, and the computer system saying, no, that's not how that works anymore. So we had to reach out to district managers going like, what's going on? This isn't, Blockbuster Corporate changed the policy.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks for leaving us in the dark on that one.
Oh, yeah. That's always a stupid conversation.
Like a customer brought in their email, like their email printout saying that the policy changed before we ever heard back from corporate.
Oh, God. Yeah. First of all, that they printed the email out to show you. But second of all, that you had to get that from a customer. That's, oh, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, we saw a lot of movies that way, and we got into a lot of older horror films through that whole thing too, because they had such a nice selection of that kind of stuff. Especially as far as newer things like those After Dark Horror Fest films, and those were always available through Blockbuster. A lot of those are really fun, so that was cool. But didn't get to see this in a theater. Don't remember hearing it talked up very much at the time, other than the fact that it was there. Just a shame. But it's one that kind of stuck with me over time. And, eventually I'm like, this isn't easy to access. I just need to buy a copy of it. So, definitely, snagged a Blu-ray. And, this would be a really good 4K disc too. I don't know if there's any plans for that, but it's such a good looking film.
Yeah, I ended up getting it on DVD when I worked at Blockbuster because used films, like I got the discount. And then they announced the special edition, which had the director's cut. And it came in one of those like cardboard sleeves that looked like one of the letters, like the cover is like the letter addressed to the San Francisco Chronicle. And I was like, I need to have that. Need to have that. Never got a copy of it. And now that's like you go to the store and get a Blu-ray. That is the cover art of the Blu-ray copy. And
That's like, absolutely the one up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
you know what this would benefit from? Criterion release.
Criterion or Arrow. Release. One of those two. Arrow does a very nice job on stuff too. It's I feel like they tend to skew a little bit more towards the pulpier stuff, the more cult favorites. But yeah, this would definitely work as a Criterion disc too. I could see that. I know the second disc on that thing's got a ton of features, and that's you know, perfect for Criterion. You know, they just need to find some, you know, additional stuff, because that's part of the fun of, you know, their release.
Oh yeah.
And then you need somebody to, you know, write an extensive pamphlet to you know, put in as a pack in, because that's also part of their shtick. Now, who would you like to write the Criterion insert for a Zodiac release?
Who would I like, or who do I think they'd get? Because I think they get Robert Graysmith, because he can't shut up about Zodiac.
Yeah, I think that would probably be an easy get. Now, who would you like?
Honestly, I would like Stephen King. I would like Master for himself to write, because again, like, this is a thriller, it's a drama.
Yeah.
But the shit that happens in this is horrific and it's true. Like, this is a true horror. I mean, in this situation, fiction. But the fiction comes from some of the details, not necessarily the actual crimes themselves. So yeah, I would like to see Stephen King. I feel like Stephen King could. I'm honestly curious about where Stephen King was during this period in his life.
Yeah, like, him and Ted Cruz. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's we're definitely going to beat that dead horse. But God knows Stephen King could write a decent essay about this. He's done his fair share of essays about film and other things that he enjoys. So, yep, I could buy that for sure. I would buy that. But yeah, this could be a fun 4K release for Criterion. Why the hell not? Yeah,
I know. It seems like their kind of movie too, because it's it's obviously not indie, but it's definitely more leaning towards drama than it would towards like horror. So
yeah,
and they're doing horror too.
Yeah, not that they don't have their fair share of horror films. Yeah, absolutely. Well, just the film's got a good sense of humor.
Yeah, it does.
It really does. You know, not just the interactions with Robert Downey Jr.'s Paul Avery and Gyllenhaal's Graysmith, but so many of the little interactions throughout the thing. There is a decent amount of kind of low-key comedy, I guess.
I would say like a dry humor with a lot. Some of the line deliveries are definitely humorous.
I still keep thinking about the awesome cast too. Brian Cox sticks around for a decent amount as the attorney that Zodiac wants to take his call for the morning show and everything. He's always good.
Scene,
yes.
On the rewatch, the scene, I completely forgot it wasn't Zodiac on the phone. Completely forgot. So I'm like, oh my god, like this was what he sounded like. This is like nuts. And then after the fact, like, you know, a scene or two afterwards being like, oh, that was him. That was a call from the mental institution. I was like, fuck. You got me. You got me.
God, just the different phone calls that Graysmith gets throughout the film. Just the breathing. You know, if that's all he allows. Yeah, that's some creepy shit.
I've got to ask. What would you say is your scariest or most tense moment in the film? Ooh. Something that really sticks with you, like, oh, shit.
The scene where he follows the protectionist to his home and and he realizes that there's very much potential for his life to be in danger. Not just because there may be somebody else in the house and the guy is claiming that they're alone, but also that he's going to try to get confirmation about a handwriting sample. I think it was, right? And yet,
no, it's not. It's Robert. Shit.
I know there's so many threads in this. It's hard to keep them all.
Yeah.
But then it turns out, no, it's actually the projectionist that lettered all the posters. He's talking to the person who, put together the clue he's tracking down. He just flies up those stairs and, you got the double cylinder deadbolt on the door and he's not getting out without a key. Yeah. It's, that is a very creepy, tense scene. Absolutely.
Yeah. For me, it doesn't top the beginning, where after the initial murders happen and Zodiac does that phone call, they, interpose like over the actual scene itself. Like, so you're watching the cops come upon the surviving male victim against the car and you're hearing the Zodiac's phone call. That phone call sticks with me. That ending of goodbye. Oh, dude, like I can't. For me, that is the worst sensation. Like,
Yup. Speaking of that particular murder, the younger and older actors portraying Mike, great casting with Jimmy Simpson as the older version. Yeah. They have such good similar, a lot of that's hair and makeup and too, but no, they pull that off. You don't always get that in biopics, as much as I think the genre of, a period piece, of something like this, certainly those types of details have improved over the years of filmmaking. Oftentimes people have nothing like their real world counterparts. Okay, now Matt, I know there was something about the score that you wanted to discuss.
Yes, to back on that, the sound designer that Fincher hired for the film, Ren Kleiss, I think is how you pronounce his name. He, when designing the sound for the film, noted that there was no score. Of course, Fincher didn't want to have score at the time. He just wanted to use licensed music. So he started inserting scores from prior films to just illustrate that, hey, there's no musical accompaniment in the background of the scene. This is what it sounds like to have that. And so David Shire ended up scoring the film based upon Fincher's enjoyment of the conversation, which I thought was really interesting how that kind of all fit together. Because we could have ended up with a film with just licensed music, which isn't bad, but the score is good.
Yeah, and it's funny because so often they use like temporary scores and then they end up influencing the way a score turns out. It's like how everything in so many action sci-fi movies ends up sounding like the score to Aliens because they typically use the score to Aliens to do those temp scores. But yeah, that's very cool. I like that.
Since you bring that up, I will say one of my favorite scores in horror of all time is the original Alien score because it is so subtle. It is just so almost silent for the entirety of the music of the movie that when it does happen, it happens and it's so fitting. So beautiful. Yeah, I could go on. Horror music is definitely a big thing for me. Like, I'm a huge fan of scored music, so like when horror actually makes full use of that, like Hereditary, I can't picture that film without that score. And when you listen to that score on its own, like that score on its own is horrific. Like it is so unnerving, it's so unsettling, like it puts you into that environment without having any visual representation. And I feel like that's for a score, like that's what you need.
Yeah, one of my favorites that I don't hear enough people bring up is the score to The Ring, the Gore Verbinski American remake.
Yep.
It's really good. It's
good.
I really wish he got a little more praise, and maybe it did at the time, because that's a film not enough people continue to bring up. I know parts of it are kind of dated just because of technology moving on, but it works as a good period piece, and it's an absolute banger remake of an already great horror film.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably one of the downsides to it as like a memorable horror is especially of the era. It's very much like, well, it's not the Japanese film. And it's not like it wasn't trying to be. Like it references a Japanese film.
Yeah,
Like,
and there's a lot of
not
beats
trying
that
to
are
be
the
like,
same, but yeah, it's definitely different enough. Yeah, and in its own right, an absolutely great film. They knocked it out of the park with that one. It's
not a carbon copy. For me, like it wasn't a carbon copy. That's
one of those things where it's a justified remake in that regard.
Yeah.
Not a cash in. Not that I think remakes are necessarily bad outright. I know a lot of people, get a little worked up when they hear that, something is, I mean, to be fair, I was one of them. I was not wild about hearing about Train to Busan being remade as, this one. I can't even remember what it's called, but it's coming before too long here. But I've heard enough people, ultimately, praise the people that were working on it, and I'm willing to give it a shot. And I absolutely don't mind those, 20 years later modern remake type remakes. No. Those are, sometimes not wonderful, but sometimes pretty damn good. Think of it this way. In the 80s, everybody was remaking horror films out of the 50s. And, in the, 2010s, everybody was remaking horror films out of the 80s and the 90s. So, it's always cyclical. It's always going to continue to happen. It's all right.
Don't be my Friday the 13th remake. I will go to that remake.
Never dream of it. That's one I haven't seen in quite some time, actually. That'd be worth a watch for sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yep.
What did you think about the CG used in this film?
Honestly, I did not find much noticeable. I'm sure a lot of blood splatter is CG.
Yep. All of the blood in the film is CG.
That makes sense. Yeah. I don't think it's badly.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I don't think it's badly done. Yeah, it's that's the good thing about this film, because it's from 2007, and that was right smack dab in this period of films, particularly some horror films, were all shot on handheld DV cameras, like consumer grade from the time, like Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, and films that have such specific look, or hell, even David Lynch with Red Empire, that have such a horribly nasty, grainy look, because they're just standard def video. And if you have a DVD of one of these from back when, you absolutely don't have the need to buy a 4K upgrade or let alone a Blu-ray of any of these, because they're still going to look the same. It's, other than maybe just a little bit of stuff being cleaned up a little. The Inland Empire Criterion release is the AI assisted upres that David Lynch oversaw himself. It does look quite a bit better, but that's
fair.
It's one of those movies that will forever have that place in that time because of the style of shooting. Whereas Zodiac just looks gorgeous. It's those films that will continue to look gorgeous. And again, really not noticeable to me, the blood. It's
lots of shots of some of the bird scenes, and then you also juxtapose that with the large shots of the cityscape. Like Fincher knows what he's doing. Like he knows how to shoot a film, and that is apparent throughout this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's funny how all those people that came up doing commercials and music videos are just masterful filmmakers. I mean, even to a certain degree, Michael Bay, the guy can he can shoot a damn film.
He makes Michael Bay movies.
Yes, he does.
Like
shooty boom boom.
Credit to him. Like I think he's a better filmmaker than storyteller.
Yes,
because like the first Transform movie, like it's a really good shot. That Transform movie has really good shots. The story could have used some work. But it looks like he has some good looking shots in it. He knows how to direct a film when he gets out of his own ass. He knows how to direct a film.
Yeah. But yeah, shout out to the people, the working, I want to say working man, but working person director, who absolutely earned their stripes with stuff like that, because they got the chops.
Yeah.
Again, apologies for the rough episode. If you want to follow Matt, you can find him on all the socials at the right Hidalgo. That's right with the WRITE. And this has been Murders with Mertens, a horror film podcast. Thank you for letting us tickle your ear holes. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are so inclined. I'll be back soon enough with another episode. But until next time, stay spooky, everyone. Hey, horror fam, I've got to apologize to y'all for the brief episode and the awful audio quality, as I've suddenly started dealing with major encoding lag issues. But a super big apology goes out to my guest, Matthew Hidalgo, as what was an awesome couple-hour conversation ended up being around half an hour of usable content. And this is just falling off. Fuck.